Hey folks, Tom here. Before we get into this week's episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast, I wanted to talk to you about voting, not voting for president. We've done that, and we won't talk about that very much at all today, but rather voting for the Newmarkers Newsmakers of 2020. We want you to nominate the people, the companies, the products, and the events that really made 2020 memorable. So we have created an online ballot, an online form for you to fill out. We will include it in the podcast notes. We'll post it up on social media. We'll get it out to you as many ways as we can, and we're asking for your input. We will take the information, come up with some finalists, and then send that out to you for another vote. So I hope you'll take just a few minutes to fill out the form. Again, you can find it on the podcast page. You can find it on the MassDevice story that I will post. And again, we'll share it via social media. So please be part of the selection of 2020's Newmarkers Newsmakers. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
All right, we're going to turn that theme music down, Chris. There's Chris Newmarker and Sean Whooley from MassDevice. There's just too much excitement this week. I think we need to keep it down and kind of a down low this week. A little quiet medtech oasis. What do you think?
It's good just to keep it calm. Just think happy thoughts, paint happy trees, fluffy clouds. That's what we got.
Deep breath.
There's no shame in listening to some watching some Bob Ross or even Enya. I mean, no shame in Enya this year. I bet her she's getting extra music sales this year. This might be an Enya year.
Maybe we'll close up with some Enya. Hopefully she won't sue us for using it.
She's gonna get called for a lawyer in Ireland again.
That is all we need here at DeviceTalks.
That's what shut us down.
That's right. I do not need Enya on my butt. So, but we are rebels here at DeviceTalks. Anyway,
right? Yeah.
Lots of big news this week in the device world outside of the I won't even use the word election. All right, before we get into this week's keynote conversations, I'll talk about our opening keynote in a moment. They're actually mentioned in our Newmarkers Newsmakers Top 5. Later on, we'll speak with Julian, Nikolchev, and Oliver Keown. They're from Intuitive Surgical. Sean Whooley, who is joining us, wrote about them last week, forming a venture fund. It's actually part of a much larger effort to expand Intuitive's reach. So it's a very interesting conversation. But now is the time. Now is the event that everyone has been waiting for. It's time for Newmarkers Newsmakers. It's the highlight of this podcast. But we're going to try to just bring the energy down a bit. Again, there's a lot of tension this week, so we're going to roll the Newmarkers Newsmakers sound. I want everyone to put their head down on their desk or lie flat on their office floor, or just sort of take some deep breaths and just enjoy these soothing sounds of the ocean waves.
Yeah.
And just bring your energy to a new calm level. So. How's that feel, Chris?
Oh man, it's great. Oh, wow. So are you gonna go get the 6-pack of Coronas, or should I?
Sean, why don't you go grab the beers? Well, Chris starts off with item number 5.
I got a bag of limes in my fridge. I always get a big bag of Costco limes, so we're good.
I just bought limes at the grocery store this morning, so let's.
All right, we got all the limes we'll need. We're in a calm space now. Bring us number 5 on the Newmarkers Newsmakers list.
Number 5 on the list is the election.
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding, Tom.
We had a good thing going, Chris.
Guys, I gotta go. I can't do that.
You can't do that. Sean's got a good idea. So, all right, number 5 on the list. Kind of depressing too. Actually, like the FDA's, warning, alerting laboratory staff and healthcare providers about, potentials for false positive results for these rapid COVID-19 antigen tests that we have out there. There's been, the test can be very useful for just like quickly trying to figure out what's going on. But, it's already been, known that it's already been out there that they aren't as accurate as diagnostic tests. And this is just like a little bit more in this area. So it's just unfortunately like another example of just all the the challenges that we still have around testing. I know in Minnesota it's still taking like days to get results, and our case counts are ramping up again in the state as well as like the whole upper Midwest. So here we go. So that was a nice depressing bit of news. So that's.
You have any good news for us, Chris? Any happy news on number 4?
Hey, we got the most innovative medical device of the year. I mean, that's number 4.
That's great news.
Number 4 of the list. Every year, one thing that gets a lot of clicks on MassDevice is we look at all the nominees for the Prix Galien USA Awards. These are like some people call them the quote unquote Nobel Prize of MedTech and Pharma. And we do a roundup of the most innovative devices of the year based on which devices got nominated. And now, Prix Galien has, announced that the top medical technology of the year is Abbott's MitraClip system, a minimally invasive transcatheter mitral valve repair system. And this is TAVR's a hot area. Doing, TMVR, could be even bigger. There's a huge need for mitral valve repair, and this is hopefully a really good technology for especially like older people who just really can't have their chest cracked open, can't have open heart surgery. So Prix Galien is kind of pointing out the real innovative nature of Abbott's MitraClip device. So that's number 4 on the list.
Well, that's really great timing, Chris, because our opening keynote conversation is with Neal Moat. He's the CMO of Abbott's Structural Heart Group, and we'll talk about MitraClip and some other important news from Abbott in this interview. But first, let's listen to this week's 2-minute detox, brought to you by Explorer Surgical. Welcome to our new podcast feature, the 2-minute detox. Get it? DeviceTalks Detox. Anyway, we created this segment to give medtech companies the opportunity to use our platform to tell their own stories in short 2-minute chapters. Run an installment in each of our 4 episodes coming up, so we can bring you even more important medtech stories in this podcast. This is sponsored content, but it's important content. I know you'll enjoy it. I'm thrilled that our first detoker is Jennifer Freed, the CEO of Explorer Surgical. Now let's learn why Jennifer Freed co-founded Explorer Surgical with Dr. Alex Langerman, the company's chief medical officer. The two met while Dr. Langerman led the Operative Performance Research Institute at the University of Chicago, and it was there that Dr. Langerman shared the problems he was facing in ensuring that ORs run smoothly.
What he said was 50% of the time, I'm going to come into the room, I'll have my favorite rep, my normal scrub, my normal circulator. I'm doing one of the cases I do all the time, and everything is coordinated perfectly. It's like you have a conductor there in this perfect orchestra of events. However, the other half the time I come in and I may have a new rep, or my rep can't be there in person, or I have a new tech, and I'd find myself with my patient open on the table, reaching out my hand, only to discover that not only did the team not have what I needed ready for me, but it wasn't even in the room. So everybody is sitting there twiddling their thumbs while we send somebody out of the room, down the hall to another floor to get the item that I need. When I heard this, I didn't believe Alex. It didn't make sense to me that you would have things like this happening because of workflow problems in an area as critical as surgery. And so I became just deeply invested in working with him to try to create a solution, which is where we came up with having a digital playbook to have best practices available for the team, no matter who was in the room. And right now, we've seen that problem magnified even more because of travel restrictions around COVID, access restrictions to hospitals. It's much harder to have your ideal person in the room than it was a year ago.
I hope you enjoyed that chapter in Explorer Surgical's story. Tune in to next week's DeviceTalks Weekly to hear how the company will differentiate itself in an increasingly crowded field. This opening keynote conversation is brought to you by DeviceTalks Tuesdays. Join us at 4 p.m. this Tuesday to hear from our friends at Stress Engineering about the importance of digital solutions for the design and manufacturing of medical devices. Go to DeviceTalks.com for more information. Well, Neal Moat, welcome to the podcast.
Tom, thank you very much for inviting me. Excited to be here.
We have a lot to talk about. Abbott's been making some news lately, but I'd love to find out a little bit more about your background. You've only joined Abbott and sort of the corporate side of things recently, correct? You're a physician and had been working until just a few years as a practicing physician?
Yeah, so Tom, as you can probably tell by my accent, I'm not from the US. So I was a practicing physician in London, in England.
I didn't want to say anything, but yes, I did notice.
It's a kind of weird accent, but I came from a cardiac surgical background, really repairing heart valves, but then got into the transcatheter intervention world about 12 years ago. And moved to Abbott 2 years ago. So moved from clinical practice to industry and from London to Northern California. So it was quite an exciting time.
That is exciting. So what is it? Where do you fall in Abbott's corporate structure, and what are your duties there?
I think that it's an exciting role. I lead a team of medical affairs, and we kind of interact with almost all parts of the business unit internally, from regulatory affairs to clinical to legal to business development, R&D. So we kind of provide medical input and expertise to help and support all of these divisions. And then we have externally facing roles where we interact with healthcare professionals, regulatory bodies, notified bodies, even the media on occasion. So it's a kind of diverse role.
We're glad to have you. So you're also, I imagine, interacting with physicians, walking them through new tools and technologies. I'm curious, you were in the UK previously. Now you're working primarily in the US when you're under normal circumstances. Has that any difference in talking with physicians in one continent versus the other, or is it a universal language?
I think it's a mixture. I mean, there is a universal language. Mm-hmm. I think of how physicians and healthcare professionals talk. Obviously, Abbott is a global business, so it's not just the UK and the US. It's obviously the whole of Europe, Asia Pacific, Latin America. So it's you can imagine across that global geography, there are slight differences to healthcare and also healthcare professionals, not surprisingly. But there's an underlying trait of wanting to do the best for patients. And and I think one of the things, mm-hmm. when I moved to Abbott was I spent a lot of time talking to a lot of senior people in Abbott, and the Abbott mission is to deliver better life through better health. And I think that rang true with me as a physician. Mm-hmm. And I think that rings true across healthcare professionals worldwide. That's what we're all trying to do. We achieve that in different ways, but that's one of the reasons why I felt comfortable moving to Abbott.
So let's talk a bit about your products. You had some news this week involving the MitraClip. Received the 2020 Prix Galien USA Award. I don't know how involved you were in sort of that submission or that process and the news in general, but what is that? What was your takeaway from winning that award? Obviously, it's very prestigious. And what does it mean? How does it help you do your job better going forward?
Well, I think it's always exciting and rewarding to receive this kind of recognition. I think with MitraClip, which is a minimally invasive transcatheter technology to repair leaking mitral valves, this has been in clinical practice for about 16 years with over 100,000 implants, and it really is. In my clinical practice, I was involved in using this technology back in the UK, and it is a very safe, very minimally invasive. The patients usually go home within a day or two of the procedure, rather than having to have open heart surgery to deal with their mitral valve problems. I think the Galien Foundation and the pre-Galien Awards, I believe, they're considered as industry's equivalent to the Oscars in the biopharmaceutical and medical technology world. I really have played a tiny role in this. I mean, there's so many people in Abbott and in eValve who Abbott acquired to acquire the MitraClip technology, who have done this over the last 16 years or so. But it's a great honor, and I think it just recognizes the excellence of that innovation and how it's allowed people to lead better lives.
Talk about the importance of the MitraClip and sort of what sort of evolutionary step is it in treating heart disease?
Yeah, so the concept behind the MitraClip was in fact a surgical procedure developed by Ottavio Alfieri in Milan, in Italy, and he would stitch the two leaflets. The mitral valve has got two leaflets. The word mitral comes from a bishop's mitre, so the valve resembles in some ways a bishop's mitre, and the Alfieri maneuver was to stitch the two leaflets together, and the clip was developed as a minimally invasive transcatheter technology to allow that to be done through a puncture in the groin rather than open heart surgery. So it's mimicking a surgical procedure. The real advance to it is that minimally invasive transcatheter approach, which minimizes the stress and trauma for the patient, allows the patient a much more rapid recovery, allows them to go home quickly, but perhaps more importantly, allows them to get back to work, to their social activities, to normal activities of daily living much faster than having the prior conventional surgical approach. And over the years, we have many clinical trials showing its dramatic effect on improving the quality of life for the patients treated with MitraClip.
I ask this question in every interview, but how has the past 6 months in dealing with COVID impacted we can get the numbers from the quarterly reports, but just from your perspective, how has COVID-19 impacted the people who sought treatment with the MitraClip? Have you seen a drop as a result, or is this simply the kind of procedure that cannot wait?
I think it's difficult to be precise about that. In some patients, the procedure cannot wait. They're in hospital. They are, acutely ill, and they need the procedure in hours or days. There are some where it's more elective. I think the effect of COVID on healthcare has been dramatic, obviously. Not just care of patients who acquire the infection, but the effect of the pandemic on the provision of healthcare for non-infective, non-COVID issues. And I think I'm sure you're aware that there's a lot of data there that the provision of other aspects of healthcare has been affected by this. In the cardiovascular field, there's clear evidence that patients who have acute coronary syndromes, unstable angina, myocardial, heart attacks, myocardial infarctions, are not going to hospital to fast enough to get care for those conditions. And so there's a knock-on effect from COVID, which is perhaps not talked about very much, and that is it's affecting healthcare for patients with, in the field that I'm involved with, patients with structural heart conditions, patients with valvular heart disease are maybe not receiving the treatment as rapidly as they should be. And the other impact is that we've got good evidence that patients are afraid, frightened, not very keen, whatever word you want to put on it, to go to major healthcare facilities to have investigations or interventions. There's certainly a level of them being uncomfortable.
Well, let's move over to the AFib side of things. I know you had some news there recently. Can you bring us up to date on any clinical trials and new products there?
Yes, of course. I think there's a lot of interest in the atrial fibrillation space, as you probably know. When the heart goes into atrial fibrillation, one gets stasis in the left atrial appendage, which is like a little cul-de-sac or a little nuchal cranny in the left atrium. And when the atrium goes into atrial fibrillation, you start to lose the normal pattern of flow through the atrium. It leads to stasis in this appendage, and that can lead to blood clot formation. Those clots can then move to the brain and give patients stroke. So that's the underlying clinical problem. One can treat that to some extent with blood thinning medications, but certainly in the more elderly patients, that comes along with an increased risk of bleeding. So you kind of prevent one cause of stroke in preventing the clot formation, but you produce another in terms of bleeding into the brain. So the idea behind left atrial appendage closure is to close off that appendage so that blood clots can't form within it. The device that we have is called Amulet. This is part of the Amplatzer line, which is a whole series of products used to basically close holes or close defects in the heart, actually generated by a physician called Kurt Amplatz, who was an amazing individual who unfortunately passed away a few months ago in his 90s, but he was still actively researching in his own lab almost to the last few months of his life. So he's had an incredible impact on healthcare in this space. The Amulet device has been approved in Europe for several years and is the market leading device for left atrial appendage closure in Europe, and has a nice mechanism of action with a disc which helps you close off the origin or the ostium of the appendage. So a nice sort of anatomic way to close off the appendage. The IDE trial with Amulet, the enrollment was completed. The follow-up is about to be completed, and we hope to submit the PMA to FDA later on this year. And we would hope to bring that product to the United States later next year. And it's very exciting for us. And coming from my background in Europe, I think it was the preferred product for closing the left atrial appendage. So it will be nice to bring that to the US market. And as you alluded to, we have another very large clinical trial starting called the Catalyst trial, which is comparing left atrial appendage closure to a newer generation of anticoagulant drugs, the NOAC.
Overall, what are some of the challenges you face going forward? I mean, we're all looking at a global pandemic, and that's a challenge for all of us. How is that uniquely impacting you? And maybe we can actually talk about something that isn't related to a pandemic, and can speak to some of the challenges and opportunities you're facing and working toward resolving.
Well, maybe if we start without the pandemic, because I mean the pandemic really is important.
Thank you. Yes.
Important, but I hope that life will exist beyond the pandemic.
We'll put the pandemic aside. Let's focus on non-pandemic.
I think that the challenges in structural heart disease is many of the conditions in structural heart disease are degenerative. What that means is they're a condition of that increases in frequency the older that you get. So particular valvular heart disease is much more prevalent in the older population. And what's happening with the world's population is the demographics are changing quite dramatically. And the projections are that the number between now and 2050, the number of patients over the age of 60 will double from about 1 billion now to about 2 billion. Then, wow. And the number of patients over the age of 80 will treble by 2050. And so there's a challenge. How our healthcare system is going to cope with this dramatically increased prevalence of structural heart disease in these populations?
I'll be in that group.
Yeah, well, I hope to be in that group.
I hope you are as well.
So that's a challenge, and I think what we're trying to do within Abbott is look to develop innovative solutions to address that clinical need. And what has happened in recent years and will continue to happen is imaging modalities have changed dramatically that allow us to image structural heart disease, and not just image it, but do imaging during the intervention. So we're able to guide novel interventions by innovative imaging to improve and increase the number of types of procedures that we can do in this minimally invasive transcatheter way. I think that is one of the ways of trying to address that challenge of structural heart disease moving forward. So it's going to be a very exciting area over the next 5, 10, 15 years. The pandemic is interesting, just to touch back on it briefly, because it clearly is changing the way currently that healthcare is provided. There's a lot more virtual care, a lot more telemedicine. At Abbott, we're intimately involved in looking at remote technologies or virtual technologies for training, for supporting procedures. So rather than proctors, be they Abbott employees or other healthcare professionals, traveling to support cases, we're starting to support those using various platforms to allow them to be done remotely with multi-channel support, with various imaging being supported online, and very good audio communication between the virtual person and the operator. So that's a big change that's actively happening. And I think even beyond the pandemic, I don't think healthcare will ever quite go back to the way it was before. I think remote monitoring, remote education, remote doctoring, it won't all be that, but things will never go back completely to the way they were before.
And just to follow up, this is a final question. With the remote monitoring, are you developing an internal platform for that, or are you working with one of the many smaller companies out there trying to build those connections?
At the moment, we're working with a number of smaller companies to use the technologies that they've had in development for a while. I can't predict what the future would be within Abbott about whether they would become part of Abbott or we would develop our own. But at the moment, we're working with other companies to deliver these remote, certainly the remote proctoring. We do have outside the structural heart division within Abbott, we do have remote monitoring capabilities already with some of our pacemakers, defibrillators, a device called CardioMEMS, which monitors pulmonary artery pressure. So we do have internal platforms established prior to the pandemic. But this remote proctoring is we're working with external providers to do that in the short term.
Excellent. Well, it is an interesting space, and thank you for updating us on that and on your entire program. It's great to connect with you, and thanks for joining us on the podcast.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you. Nice to talk to you.
All right, and we're back. Chris Newmarker, we're on number 3 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers list. What do you got?
Hey, the news was earnings out of Coloplast. This is the Danish medical device giant. And actually, their U.S. headquarters is right here where I'm based in Minneapolis. But they were reporting this week that they were able to boost their annual earnings even as the COVID-19 pandemic held down sales. It just sounds like they were very diligent on trying to control costs at the same time that they're they say, hey, we're still putting money in innovation. We're still trying to do stuff for the future. So they were able to boost their annual earnings, and they're saying that they're expecting their the revenue growth to accelerate some next year. So they're looking at a better 2021. It's interesting. We are just in the thick of earnings season right now, and so that's why we got that's a big reason why we got Sean on here. You've just been cranking out the earnings story, Sean. It's really great. I mean,
having fun doing it too.
Woo-hoo.
I mean, it is. I mean, it can be really interesting to look at those numbers and see how are these companies digging themselves out of this recession and the pandemic? I mean, what are some big standouts for you right now?
Yeah, I would say that Hologic's earnings, it's interesting to kind of keep tabs on the companies that are heavily involved in COVID-19 testing,
Totally.
Therapeutics, things like that, because their outlooks have all changed dramatically. And one of the things that stuck out from Hologic was that they brought in nearly $820 million in their diagnostic segment alone.
Wow.
Which year over year from this quarter, the fourth quarter last year, is a 375.8% increase.
Wow.
So
more than quadrupled. That's just crazy.
That all goes down. Yeah, it all goes down to their assays and their the Panther and Panther Fusion systems that analyze the COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 tests, and I think that is a sign of how those companies are doing for the most part. The ones that are producing tests.
There's so much demand for those tests right now. I mean, it's just,
and especially Hologic's received definitely a few of those government contracts for them too. I think so. They've been definitely one of the top performers in that respect.
Yeah, really. So that's kind of like, I I mean, it's unfortunately happening because we got a pandemic. But yeah, I guess it's a bright spot for some medical device companies that they actually are playing a really important role right now, trying to fight this coronavirus. So yeah, that's really interesting.
Well, and then on the flip side, you got Stryker, which is an orthopedic implant company, which basically, had to deal with not being able to do anything because nobody was having elective procedures or things like that. But the street projections for their earnings per share was about $1.41, and they brought in $2.14 per share. So 73 cents ahead of the projections. And I just thought, especially for a company that's dealing with quite a difficult break, I guess, if you're looking at, other companies taking advantage of what's in front of them, Stryker's had to really claw back for that. So I think that's a decent performance from a big company there.
Yeah, and they're the world's largest orthopedic device company. And one thing that's just been really impressive about them amid the pandemic, I've thought, is that, these Mako robots, I don't know what the most recent earnings report said, but I know through the year they've been selling these things still. It's it's definitely it's something that's kind of changed the game in the space. That they have these robotic systems and everything packaged around them. So
there's a lot of pressure on the big cap companies trying to sell large capital items. So we'll talk about that a bit next week, actually, on the podcast. But that's great. And I think we'll hear from Stryker a little bit on further down the list. But any other interesting reports, earning reports there, Sean?
Yeah, I thought one of the ones that really stuck out was Inspire Medical Systems, which is Minneapolis-based near you, Chris. And,
here we go.
And they, it's a sleep apnea treatment developer. So, they've companies like, you think of ResMed, they were sending, sleep apnea machines, just anything that would help with the ventilator needs early in the pandemic. Well, Inspire Medical System, they had a 24.2% bump in the markets after releasing their earnings.
Wow.
They raised their revenue guidance too by more than $20 million. And even though they posted losses, they still beat the street by 33 cents on EPS and a total of $13.3 million on revenues. So even with the losses, they posted a good quarter, and the markets responded in kind.
Well, they do have an alternative device for sleep apnea that I believe involves an implant and a device that stimulates and keeps the mouth open, the passageway open to allow people to breathe more easily when they sleep, which is kind of interesting that you would think this would be the kind of care that people would put off if they were going to stay away from medical care. Apnea, of course, is a critical disease, but it's not something that someone's going to rush themselves to a physician. So it's interesting they've been able to see such growth at this time when we were just talking about Stryker and their elective surgeries and orthopedics. See that they've seen the decline, or many other electives have seen the decline, but they seem to have found a way to keep growing, which is great.
Yes, obviously technology that's gotten some buzz.
Yeah.
And, so they're very cool. So we're seeing more innovation. It's still continuing on, even amid everything that we see going on.
Yes, we all need our sleep, and we're finding ways to get it, because Lord knows if we don't, then things will just get a little more tense. But we don't want to talk about tense or that election word. We won't mention it. Chris Newmarker, what is number 2 on the list?
Number 2 on the list is Masimo is going to acquire, I hope I pronounce this right, Lidco for a little over $40 million. Lidco is a hemodynamic monitoring device maker that's targeting primarily critical care and high-risk patients. So it's like Lidco's equipment, measures metrics including cardiac output, stroke volume, systematic vascular resistance, as well as blood monitoring, intravenous fluid monitoring, and vasoactive support. So these are just like a lot of different types of extra metrics that technologies for measuring stuff that Masimo is going to bring into its wheelhouse with this acquisition. So really interesting.
And Chris, the number 1 Newmarker's newsmaker.
So number 1 on the list is Stryker is set to complete their acquisition of Wright Medical on November 10th. They cleared cleared some major regulatory hurdles this week. They got approvals from the U.S. Federal Trade Commission and the U.K. Competition and Markets Authority, and they basically proving, basically they were able to win approval from the antitrust authorities by promising Stryker promised to divest certain assets to DGA Global in order to make the deal happen. And as I said, Stryker's already the world's largest orthopedic device company. This is just going to make Stryker even bigger. So even amid the pandemic, the election, everything, here we have this like huge major medical device merger deal going through $4.7 billion.
And Stryker is a great lead into our closing keynote conversation. As I mentioned up top, we had an opportunity to speak with Julian, Nikolchev, and Oliver Keown of Intuitive Surgical's new venture effort. And really interesting stuff happening at that robotics company. So let's listen. This closing keynote conversation is brought to you by MassDevice and Medical Design and Outsourcing. Go to MassDevice.com and MedicalDesignAndOutsourcing.com for the latest news, analysis, and trends in the medtech industry. Well, Julian Nikolchev and Oliver Keown, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Good to see you.
So, Julian, you and I haven't seen each other for a time. It's great to connect. And I do want to talk about your new venture in a moment, but fill us in on what you're doing at Intuitive and bring folks up to speed on your medtech background a little bit.
Sure. Well, Tom, it's been a while. It's a pleasure to see you. And as you know, my background is probably more than 30 years of medtech development, of development of new technology. I've been involved in starting a number of companies. Early on, started at Target Therapeutics and spun out Conceptus out of Target Therapeutics. And after that, started several other companies. And rather than going through each one of them, I've been involved in interventional cardiology, women's healthcare, and most recently Pivot Medical, which was an orthopedic company. The interesting thing about all these companies is the idea of bringing new technology to the market was always exciting, identifying a clinical need and then bringing a new technology. But there's actually, even though there's different clinical entities and areas of involvement, there is a running theme that I found over the years that's connected all these companies, and that is minimally invasive care. Most of the companies have taken a procedure or a clinical area that is being conducted either openly or one way or another, and I've been involved in bringing technologies that have made that procedure less invasive. And if you can deliver a less invasive approach with similar or better outcomes, then everyone wins. You have the patients win, the surgeons win, the hospital wins.
Excellent. I want to follow on the minimally invasive theme because it's something we're talking about a lot more lately, which seems odd because it seems like also the thing we should be talking about almost all the time. How did you come to join Intuitive? I've known you as a startup guy. You were at Fraser Healthcare. I was surprised that you found a home in a bigger company. How did that happen?
Well, it was an interesting journey, and it wasn't something that was planned. But over the years, I've been involved and have done some projects with Intuitive. So I've known Intuitive from the beginning. As a matter of fact, when I was starting Conceptus, and even before that, I was at SRI International when Fred Moll was negotiating the Intuitive licensing of the Intuitive technology. And I met Fred at that time. And then at Conceptus, Fred and I tried to work together at some point, even because he was interested in obviously minimally invasive approaches. So starting from that end, I've known and have been involved in one way or another with Intuitive. A couple of times we tried to do some projects together much later, even with my orthopedic company. So we've had an opportunity to get to know the management team, to get to know the company. And as you know, it's an amazing ride. Intuitive has accomplished something that very few medical technology companies have accomplished, of bringing such a really radical technology to market and establishing it. And the management has just been something that I've always admired. And a couple of years, it was about a couple of years ago, Gary and I were talking, and he mentioned the fact that he's been thinking of the need for Intuitive to think beyond the typical product lifecycle for one of their platforms. And the idea of creating a group that is focused on bringing new technologies to the market that are outside of this 3 to 5 year cycle. And he asked if I would be interested in that. And it sounded just too much fun and too exciting to miss.
That's great.
So I came on board about 18 months ago to run this group.
And Oliver, tell us how you found your way to work with Julian in Intuitive. How did you get into the medtech industry?
Yeah, so my journey started a long time ago back in Scotland. So I bring the kind of clinical and then investing experience to Intuitive and our new platform that we'll talk a bit more about. But I started off as an MD in the UK, spent some time in the world of surgical innovation at Imperial College, working across policy, tech transfer, early stage, medical devices, before making the leap into venture capital. And I moved over to the US and to the Bay Area 4 years ago to join GE Ventures and join the investing team as part of investing across healthcare, IT, life sciences, tools, and medtech. And over the last couple of years, got to know the Intuitive team and hear their exciting ambitions around this new group that Julian's leading, and the ambitions to stand up a venture capital platform that would be accelerating the future of minimally invasive care, and the chance to join that group and help build the structure and set that strategy was like Julian, too good to miss. So we've been working on that over the last year or so, and recently launched.
Excellent. Well, we heard a bit about the origins of the effort, Intuitive Ventures. Let's start getting into the size and strategy. So it's $100 million. How long? Over how many years do you expect to invest that money? And can you tell us a little bit about how it's structured and what sort of vehicle? Is this an account, an evergreen fund, a separate fund? What is it? What does this venture effort look like?
Yeah. So first and foremost, we're structured as a fund. We've created a financial focus to the investing that we plan to do. So think of us as $100 million fund, 10-year charter, deploying that capital into a portfolio of early stage companies that we will support from that initial investment through follow-ons through to ultimate and pioneering of markets. And really the focus is both financial returns and aligning and backing future leaders of digital tools, precision diagnostics, focal therapeutics, medical devices that are driving positive outcomes in minimally invasive care. So that's our structure.
So what types of products do you see this capital going into, or what types of companies developing the products? Should we see it simply as a company that's developing a device that might go on the tip of a robotic arm, or is your charter much broader than that? It sounds like it is. Yeah,
much broader. So we see the future of minimally invasive care through our venture lens is really across the continuum from the early detection of disease through that therapeutic journey and ultimately follow up and recovery and rehabilitation. And so what we're backing through our venture fund is leaders across that spectrum. And so, we're looking for independent initiatives, great teams, great technologies, tackling, big market opportunities in those buckets I described. So not necessarily things that will be tied to Intuitive, and we're mandated to deploy capital first and foremost, not to tie companies to Intuitive. So we really do see these as first and foremost independent initiatives, but where we can bring value from Intuitive to help accelerate their efforts.
So Julian, speak to the strategic need or the strategic goal. Is Intuitive using this vehicle, and I imagine other efforts to really move away from, we sell you a robotic surgical system? Do they want to be providing much more than that? Are they already providing much more than that? Maybe I'm missing part of the story. Where are we going next with this vehicle and other efforts that you're leading?
Yeah, just to kind of put a little perspective on that. So when I came on board, the group that we have now is, and internally we call it the Future Forward Group. Mm-hmm. It has three pillars. One is the Intuitive Ventures that Oliver was describing. The other one is the Intuitive Business Development function. And this is a business development function that's existed for some time. It can basically be involved in looking at new opportunities for Intuitive, whether it's licensing a technology, acquiring companies, or partnering with companies. And then the third arm is the Intuitive Research. And this is a broad applied research group that is, the way I think about it, it looks for research opportunities or technologies that are kind of around the corner, that are not obvious that we will need, but could be potentially important to us. And we can seed some additional research both outside with academic institutions or internally to explore those ideas and see if they make sense. So as a whole, our role is really to keep an eye on some of the developments that could be of importance to Intuitive over time, and then build and organize them in a way that we can take advantage of them. So Intuitive Ventures, as Oliver mentioned, we have a financial goal, obviously, but we also have a strategic perspective of, if you think of what is close to Intuitive today in terms of adjacent markets, adjacent technologies, the venture lens can give us a broader view, so we can stretch ourselves into some of the new digital tools that are coming in the pipeline, and they're going to be impacting healthcare. Some of the focal therapies that also are connected to earlier and more precise diagnostics that's occurring. That's diagnostic cancer earlier, for example. So that's the lens that the Intuitive Ventures opens for us.
Wow. I wouldn't place either of those areas as an adjacent market, really. It seems like you're kind of creating a new footprint in a different area.
Well, if you think of what's happening today in healthcare as a whole, the sort of the swim lanes that one have associated, for example, with open surgical procedures or robotically assisted surgical procedures, those swim lanes are becoming very porous just because so much technology is coming in. So the digital is probably the most obvious one when you can think about the impact of machine learning. Image processing is having in identifying, for example, tissue planes during surgery, providing some guidance to the surgeons in terms of conducting the surgery. Those are adjacent technologies that were not obviously associated with this maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but are certainly now becoming more important.
Is the connection therapeutic and clinical only, or is there sort of an effort to diversify business-wise as well, to get away from being a large cap seller primarily and to really get into more of maybe a business where you can sell a lot of smaller things repeatedly?
I think it's more of a strategic, broadly speaking, strategic. What we want to focus on is really, as a whole, is the minimally invasive procedures. It's really, we want to advance, as Oliver said, and accelerate the future of minimally invasive care. And in that context, we think about the patient journey and what we always refer to as the quad aim. How can these procedures improve patient outcome? Help surgeons or physicians to conduct their procedures better, improve cost, and make the whole environment better. So within that context, we can be looking for new opportunities.
Well, Oliver, on the minimally invasive side, and Julian, you as well, I mean, are we looking at, I'm hearing a lot more of it over the past couple of months, and it may just be the people I'm talking to, but is there a renewed push either because fewer people want to get into hospitals, or there is a rise of ASCs where there's a higher and higher demand for new minimally invasive tools, or are we merely just seeing sort of an extension of the trend line that we've been seeing all these years?
So I think kind of broad, meta trends, we are seeing a shift in procedures that can be kind of downstaged into lower acuity settings of care. I think we're seeing technologies enabling that and new business models. Certainly an area of interest on the venture side, where we're looking at those independent, initiatives and startups that are driving technologies that might unlock those types of value propositions. So no, I think it's a trend, and we're keeping an eye on it, and it expands to everything, including monitoring of patients and interesting business models and tools that are driving wearables and sensors at home, and driving patients through lower cost settings of care.
And Oliver, have you made any investments from the venture fund yet?
We just announced our investment in Keela Health, the first of our portfolio in the digital health space. This is a startup company, a spin out of Duke University, that's driving kind of surgical decision making and supporting that perioperative management of patients really unlocking the power of data to support better outcomes. And it's the first of what will be many across the themes we're looking at. We've got a kind of rich pipeline and really looking for new and exciting leaders across the different spaces to keep investing in.
And again, what size of investment are you looking to make? What stage of company are you looking to invest in? And what sort of access and connection do they get to Intuitive? Are you introducing them to people inside, or are you really, is there a Chinese wall between you and what goes on in the parent company?
Yeah, absolutely. So a fundamental pillar of the platform is adding value to our portfolio. So leveraging our customer connections, our regulatory expertise, our reimbursement kind of reach, and providing access to tools and resources to help on those fronts. That's a core pillar. We do have a Chinese wall, as you say, between information sharing and the like. And what I see our responsibility on the venture side is to best provide the connectivity to the decision makers, to the key stakeholders for our portfolio companies, so they have the opportunity to collaborate with Intuitive and find paths to partnership where it makes sense. And so that's an active part of our mandate. And in terms of the stage, really we're looking at supporting a range of early stage companies. Think some seed, Series A, Series B onwards. Given the breadth of themes we're looking at, we are looking across a broad spectrum, very comfortable, backing great teams early and supporting them along their journey. And it aligns well with Intuitive's entrepreneurial spirit.
And Julian, I know you folks need to go. I just wanted to flesh out the other two pillars, the business development pillars and the research. I'm just curious, how have those materialized? Have you collaborated with companies outside of Intuitive through the BD pillar, or are you funding efforts outside of Intuitive with the research pillar, or are those both internal operations?
Yeah, it's a good question. On the business development side, we do get involved with other companies quite a bit, and the involvement could take several forms. One is, for example, we can be licensing technology if they have a technology that could be of relevance to our current businesses. We also can do some co-development efforts with the companies, and we involved in a number of those, for example. And most of the work that the business development team is doing is related to our current platforms, but we also look for opportunities that could be reaching beyond the current platforms if they can be, if they align with our strategic focus. On the research side, this is an effort. Intuitive, as you can imagine, historically has been always very much of a research engineering company. So there's always been an active research function at the company. And it has been involved in, for example, seeding the development that has led to the Intuitive SP system, the single portal system, to the newest system, which is the ION. So a lot of the work from the research teams have led to these developments. So there's always been an action. What I think has been is a little different now is that group is under this Future Forward umbrella. And what that does, in a sense, is allows us to engage with outside organizations in many different ways. So we have, and that's what's unique about the group, and that is we can make a venture investment, as Oliver described. We can become more business and strategically oriented with them, or we can fund some research projects with an outside team. And we are traditionally, Intuitive has had very close relationships to the academic institutions where advanced research goes on. So all of those are options for us to bring new ideas and new technologies to Intuitive.
Right. And just the final quick question. I'm just curious, these plans obviously have been in the works for a time, but I'm wondering if the impact of COVID has accelerated things, changed the trajectory of things at all, just to sort of kind of underlining the point that diversification is essential?
Well, and I'll answer, and then Oliver should answer because he's been very much thinking about that from a venture standpoint. But broadly speaking, I think, this type of situations like COVID kind of brings to the front what is important in our industry. So in some ways, it has accelerated certainly migration towards digital technologies, remote communication, remote assistance. These are areas that we see opportunities where maybe before COVID, it would have taken longer to start focusing in that area, but certainly now they're clearly more important to us. And Oliver, maybe you can explain, also kind of comment on your thoughts.
COVID hasn't impacted our launch of the Intuitive Ventures platform, but has brought under sharp focus the challenges of delivering care under resource constraints. And as Julian says, we see huge opportunity and adoption in digital and medtech, and a lot of startups coming out, and a lot of investment in these areas. And so, we're excited about being in the market and being a thoughtful partner to those trying to drive better outcomes in minimally invasive care.
Great thoughts, and really looking forward to tracking your progress and keeping in touch. So thank you both for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks, Tom.
Really appreciate it.
All right, well, it was great to hear from the folks at Intuitive. Lots of interesting stuff happening there. We'll certainly keep an ear on that. Now is the time when we plead for social media connection, because we're just so lonely. Sean Whooley, why don't you beg first for LinkedIn connections?
I will beg for LinkedIn connections, and I always do. You know me too well. You can find me on LinkedIn at Sean, SEAN, and then WHOOLEY. Whooley's my last name. Similarly, on Twitter, it is Sean Whooley, WTWH. So feel free to follow, connect, do whatever. And there's a very high chance I accept.
Almost 100%, I'm guaranteed. Chris Newmarker, how can folks find you on the social media channels?
Always link with me on LinkedIn, Chris Newmarker, just like a Newmarker. Always happy to connect too. And I'm on Twitter as well at Newmarker. So always get to network more and find out about what's going on.
Absolutely. And I ain't too proud to beg myself. You can find me on LinkedIn at Tom Salemi and on Twitter at MedTechTom. As mentioned up top, we're going to be taking nominations for sort of the year's Newsmakers. We've got a survey we'd be happy to send out to folks. We'll be posting that on social media, looking for the person, the company, the product, and the event that have made the most news in 2020. We will accept nominations now and then try to take a final, I'm going to use the V word here, folks, final vote that will be tallied quickly and efficiently, and we'll have those folks on the podcast. That's a wrap, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. Please do share this podcast on those aforementioned social media channels. Please give us a ranking. That actually does help people find it. And most importantly, just tell your friends and your colleagues that we're doing this. We'd love to have more people listening. And of course, tune in next week. We'll have another great episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast waiting for you.
Stay safe, stay sane. Talk again soon.